Wild ginger. Cherokee healers called it Big Stretch. They used it for fever, chest tightness, and deep body pain long before aspirin existed. Ethnobotanical records filed with the Bureau of American Ethnology in the early 1900s confirmed this wasn't guesswork. It was an organized, documented system of knowledge. 9 plants total, most growing wild right now, within reach of almost anyone watching this. And most people have never heard a single name. So the question isn't whether this knowledge existed. The question is why it nearly vanished in one generation. Pick up a dried wild ginger rhizome. It's small, rough-edged, unremarkable. Sitting next to a pharmacy receipt, it looks like something you'd sweep off a shelf without a second thought. But that root was documented as a fever aid, a respiratory support, and a pain response tool by Cherokee healers long before the first drugstore opened in the American South. That's not legend. That's not oral tradition passed along without proof. That's documented record, filed, cataloged, and then slowly, quietly forgotten. Here's where it starts. In 1891, an ethnographer named James Mooney went into Cherokee territory and began recording. What he found was not scattered folk belief. It was a coherent, organized system of plant knowledge. His field notes, along with ethnobotanical follow-ups, completed over the following decades, ended up filed with the Bureau of American Ethnology, the same federal institution that cataloged Native American cultural knowledge across the continent. Those documents are public domain now. You can look at them. Plant names written in the Cherokee syllabary, side by side with English descriptions of use and preparation category. This was not casual. This was classification. And once you understand that, the story of what happened next becomes something much harder to explain away. Wild ginger was one entry, one of hundreds. Stay with me. The root works on the body the way heat works on a tight muscle. It doesn't fight, it releases. The aromatic compounds in wild ginger carry a warming, circulatory quality that Cherokee healers applied specifically to chest congestion, fever tension, and deep nausea. Simple enough to describe, remarkable enough that early formal medical practitioners noticed. The eclectic physicians of the 1800s, practicing doctors with patients, journals, and institutional standing, documented many of the same mechanisms. Not fringe herbalists, not folk guessers, credentialed practitioners who looked at indigenous plant knowledge and saw something worth recording. Now add 2 more plants. Mullein. You've probably walked past it 100 times. The giant, fuzzy-leafed plant growing in disturbed soil along roadsides and field edges across nearly all of North America. Cherokee tradition used leaf preparations to support respiratory health. The plant is so widely distributed that it grows within 20 miles of most people watching this right now. No specialty store required, no shipping cost, just a plant that has been doing the same thing for centuries, growing in the open, waiting. Wild mint grows near creek beds, garden edges, and backyard borders, cooling where wild ginger warms. Cherokee healers used it for digestive discomfort and as support during surface fevers. The mechanism is simple enough to feel obvious in retrospect, which is exactly why it appeared across cultures worldwide. Not because the knowledge traveled, but because people everywhere found the same plant doing the same job. 3 plants, 3 accessible, practical, documented remedies. And this is only the beginning of what was filed away. But here's where it starts to get strange. This knowledge didn't stay locked inside Cherokee territory. It moved. When settlers pushed into Appalachian land, they encountered Cherokee plant knowledge directly. They adapted it and carried it into frontier medicine. By the time Jethro Kloss published Back to Eden in 1939, one of the most influential American herbal guides of the 20th century, the book was full of plant preparations that traced directly back to indigenous knowledge. Without attribution, the roots of the system were still there. The names that built it had been quietly removed. That knowledge became wartime home remedy culture. It became rural household practice. It became the handwritten remedy note passed from grandmother to grandchild without anyone left knowing where the original understanding came from. And then something shifted. In 1962, the Kefauver-Harris Amendment changed the regulatory landscape of American medicine. It tightened the requirements for proving drug safety and efficacy, and while the law addressed a real problem, the downstream effect was significant. Standardized, Patentable compounds became the only viable commercial products. Dried roots could not be scaled. Leaf preparations could not be patented. The commercial infrastructure for plant-based household remedies began to collapse, not because the remedies stopped working, but because they could no longer compete inside the new regulatory and commercial framework. This was once normal household knowledge. Not fringe, not dangerous, normal. So what happened to buckbrush, the plant Cherokee healers called hummingbird blossom, used for lymphatic and kidney support? There is a university study connected to this plant in the 1970s, promising early results, and then nothing. Filed, shelved, no follow-up. Yarrow was used by Cherokee healers and then adopted by Civil War field medics as a wound poultice and as a blood-stanching tool, and it was documented by people who had no reason to invent its usefulness. Stay with me, because the buckbrush story is where everything shifts. The trail doesn't start with a conspiracy, it starts with money. In the late 1800s, a group of licensed American physicians called the Eclectics were practicing medicine with plant-based compounds drawn heavily from indigenous knowledge, including Cherokee botanical tradition. They had journals, they had schools, they had patients who got better. The eclectic medical movement wasn't alternative medicine in the modern dismissive sense. It was mainstream American medicine for a significant portion of the 19th century. And it documented plant preparations, many of them sourced directly from indigenous healers, with the same seriousness that any practicing physician brings to a treatment record. Then came 1910. The American Medical Association commissioned a report from Abraham Flexner. The Flexner Report restructured medical education across the country. It standardized curriculum, closed dozens of smaller medical schools, and pushed the profession toward a single model of pharmacological, laboratory-based medicine. The eclectic schools closed. The plant-based clinical tradition they carried, much of it built on indigenous knowledge, was reclassified as unscientific and quietly abandoned. Not because it failed, because it couldn't be scaled, standardized, or sold. A dried root cannot be manufactured in a facility. A roadside plant cannot generate quarterly earnings. Standardized pills can. That's not a theory. That's commercial logic, and it reshaped American medicine more completely than most people ever learn. This is the part nobody tells you. Now look at what happened to 3 more plants from the same Cherokee system. Cattail grows at the edge of ponds and wetlands across the continent. The pollen was used as a nutritional supplement. The root material was used for wound dressing. Highly documented. Historically unremarkable in the best sense, it was simply useful, available, and used. Today, cattail pollen appears in specialty wellness stores. $18 a packet. The same plant, the same preparation logic. The origin removed. Sumac, not poison sumac. The wild sumac that grows in open fields across eastern North America, producing small, dense berry clusters with a tart, tangy quality. Cherokee tradition used it for sore throat and fever support. The berries carry a significant antimicrobial profile and a vitamin C density that rivals citrus. Today it is sold as an exotic superfood, rebranded, repackaged, and priced accordingly. The Cherokee healers who documented its use did not receive a label credit. Wild rose. Rose hip preparations were part of Cherokee wellness practice. Immune support, vitamin supplementation, practical household use for ordinary seasonal illness. Today, rose hip extract appears in premium supplement lines at premium supplement prices. Disconnected entirely from its indigenous roots, sold back to the same population that was cut off from the original knowledge. They didn't destroy it. They repackaged it, removed the origin, and sold it back. And that buckbrush study, here it is. Ceanothus americanus, hummingbird blossom, buckbrush. In the 1970s and into the 1980s, researchers connected to university botanical programs, including work tied to the University of Arkansas region where Cherokee plant knowledge had the deepest Appalachian overlap, began documenting the flavonoid content of this plant and its potential relationship to lymphatic tissue response. The early results were notable enough to keep studying. Then the funding stopped. No pharmaceutical application pathway existed. You cannot patent a plant that grows freely along the edge of every rural road in the eastern United States. The research sits in ethnobotanical journals, not disproven, not refuted, simply unfunded, simply unprofitable, simply left there, not because it didn't work, because you can't build a revenue model around something anyone can grow. Now, blackberry. The root bark of the blackberry plant was used by Cherokee healers for digestive illness. The astringent compounds in the root carry a tightening, settling quality that works on the gut lining in a way that 19th century American physicians understood well enough to adopt openly. Blackberry root bark preparations appeared in formal American medical guides through the 1800s. Physicians prescribed them, patients used them, and then, with the commercial turn towards standardized pharmaceutical products, the preparation disappeared from common practice. Not banned, not disproven, just no longer profitable to teach. Here is what this means right now. Mullein is growing along the road you drove to work this morning. Wild mint is at the edge of the creek behind the park, or already in your garden. Sumac, the non-toxic variety, is standing in open fields across the eastern half of the country. Cattail lines every slow-moving pond within reasonable distance of most American towns. Yarrow grows in meadows, lawns, and disturbed fields, and it's widely available dried. Wild rose edges the hedgerows and old fence lines. Blackberry grows everywhere, everywhere. Not one of these costs what a pharmacy copay costs. Not one requires a laboratory. Not one disappeared because it stopped being useful. 9 plants, documented by one of the most systematic botanical traditions in North American history. Absorbed into settler medicine, stripped of attribution, commercially displaced, and then quietly sold back in premium packaging at premium prices. The knowledge wasn't destroyed. It was edged out by systems that profit when you don't have it. Cherokee healers weren't guessing. They were running a botanical pharmacopoeia that the early American medical establishment respected enough to absorb, and then respected so little that they never said where it came from. The kind of person who watches this to the end is the kind of person who notices what doesn't add up. Which of these 9 plants grows near you right now? Tell me in the comments. I want to know where you are and what's growing there, because the next part of this story is even more specific. Next, there is a bark preparation used deep in the Smoky Mountains before 1900 that a Johns Hopkins connected researcher flagged in 1987. One reference, then silence. No follow-up publication, no second study. We're going there next.